Okay, welcome to the lecture on Chapter 9 of How to Read a Book, Determining an Author's Message. So we'll talk about sentences versus propositions, finding the key sentences, finding the propositions, finding the arguments, and finally we'll summarize the second stage of analytical reading. We talked about terms versus words. Now we'll talk about sentences versus propositions. We are getting to wider and wider context, if you notice, in our sort of explanation of how to read a book. So key terms, key propositions, key arguments, or the argument of the book. So bigger and bigger context. Not all sentences express propositions, so there's a difference between a sentence and a proposition. A question does not express a proposition, so how are you doing? That's neither true nor false. How are you doing? Commands, lock the door. That's neither true nor false. It's not a proposition. It's a sentence, but it's not a proposition. Only declarative sentences express propositions. Okay? A declarative sentence is a sentence that's either true or false, and the thing that it expresses is a proposition. It is sunny. That's either true or it's false. Planes fly. Well, it's sunny. That it might be ambiguous, like whether it's sunny or not, but that's neither here nor there. Planes fly. That's either true or it's false, and obviously it's true. But not every declarative sentence expresses a single proposition. Why? Well, Adler gives two explanations. Some sentences might be ambiguous, and this might be intentional or not. But if a sentence is ambiguous, right, it's unclear whether it expresses proposition A or proposition B. Maybe one example would be, let's go to the, I am at the bank. I am at the bank. Without the proper context, a person cannot tell whether this is a statement about being down at the river bank or being at, say, Wells Fargo. And there might be other banks that could be referred to. So unless you have the context, that sentence is ambiguous and expresses more than one proposition. So some complex sentences, they may not be ambiguous, but they express more than one proposition. So take this sentence. Suppose it's a single sentence. I am at the bank, therefore I will deposit my money. You might use a semicolon between bank and therefore, so then it would be a single sentence. That expresses more than one proposition. I am at the bank, in this case a financial institution. That's one proposition. I will deposit my money. That's another proposition. So complex sentences express more than one proposition. So there is a difference between sentences and propositions. Some sentences are not declarative and so don't express propositions, and even among declarative sentences they might express more than one proposition. So rule number 6 of analytical reading, you should mark the most important sentences in the book and discover the propositions they contain. And when we say that, discover the propositions they contain, mainly what we're asking or saying you should do is discover the meaning of the sentence. So there's the sentence itself, which is sort of a linguistic item, and then there's the meaning of the sentence, which is a semantic item. So it's the difference between sentences and propositions is a difference between syntax and semantics. So how do you find the key sentences? Well, you find the judgments upon which the author's entire argument rests. You find the judgments upon which the author's entire argument rests. So how do you do that? Well, some authors accent these key judgments by italicizing them, for example, by breaking them out from the rest of the rest of the paragraph or something, indenting it and putting it right in the middle of the page, bolding it, whatever. But if they don't do that, you can still find the key sentences, and there are various ways you can do that. One, the judgments that confuse you are probably the judgments that are important to the book. So if you're reading a book that's sort of above your level, right? The author's story about how he decided to write this book, that's not going to be a key judgment. But the author's key claim will be something, since the book is above your level, the key claim is going to be something that you don't immediately understand and something you're going to have to wrestle through. And that will kind of be a indicator of the importance of the judgment for the overall book. And, that's just a rule of thumb. And so it's not fail-safe. Sometimes it might lead you astray. Sometimes a judgment that the author makes will confuse you, but it's not a key judgment. Okay, 2, the important judgments probably contain key terms. So if you find a key term, look at the sentence in which it's used, and that sentence might be a key judgment. And 3, the key judgments probably are contained in the main argument of the book. So if you can find the main argument, you can find the key judgments. So once you find the important sentences, how do you discover the meanings or the propositions that those sentences contain? Okay, well, you discover what the sentence means, and how do you do that? Again, there's no sort of easy way to do this. You just need to interpret all the words that make up the sentence, and especially its principal words. So basically, you're just doing the process of interpretation of a sentence. And again, context is going to help you here. The author might explain that key judgment in various ways. The author is going to give a setup for laying out the key judgment. The author is going to give a summary. And so, all that is going to help you discover the meaning of that key judgment. So that takes us to rule number 7 of analytical reading. You should know the author's arguments by finding them in or constructing them out of sequences of sentences. So the author's arguments are going to be composed of the key judgments. How do you find the arguments in a book? Well, a good book usually summarizes itself as its arguments develop. Right? The author is going to help you. The author, in an expository work, wants to lead you by the hand. The author doesn't want you to, be forever guessing at what he's getting at or what she's getting at. The author is probably going to summarize his whole book in the preface and the introduction, summarize each chapter at the end of the chapter or at the beginning of the chapter, summarize each section at the end and or the beginning of the section, summarize the whole book at the end of the book, right? At least for a good book. And so do not neglect the help that the author provides you in summarizing the argument and the book for you. But if the book doesn't provide a summary, unfortunately you have to comb through the book trying to extract the argument. So you're looking for key terms, key sentences, the key argument. Here are some helpful tips in doing that hard work of finding the key argument. You're looking for multiple statements because arguments are composed of multiple statements. And for an argument, some of those statements, the premises, lead to another, the conclusion. So you're looking for a sort of inferential relationship between certain sentences and certain other sentence. The inferential relationship will be this one sentence, the conclusion, follows from the other sentences. Well then, you need to also, number 2, distinguish between the different sorts of arguments. Some arguments point to one or more particular facts leading to a general conclusion. This would be an inductive argument, while others offer general statements to prove some further general statement. This is deductive. So inductive, I've observed 100 swans and they've all been white, therefore all swans are white. So you have particular facts. This swan is white, that swan is white, leading to a general conclusion. All swans are white. Okay, so 3, you should observe what the author says he must assume, what he says can be proved, and what need not be proved because it is self-evident. So look for those sorts of admissions by the author. Self-evident claims and assumptions might serve as premises. Self-evident claims and assumptions might serve as premises of the argument, whereas the claim that he says can be proved might serve as the conclusion of the argument. Okay, so here's a summary of the second stage of analytical reading. Rule number 5, find the terms that the author is using and interpret those terms. Rule number 6, find the most important sentences and discover their meaning. Rule number 7, construct the author's argument out of the key sentences. And finally, rule number 8, find out what the author's solutions are. So with rule number 4, I believe, you had to find out what the author's problem was. With rule number 8, you find out what the author's solution is. Okay, so with the first stage of analytical reading, you're discovering what the book is about. And with the second stage, you're discovering what is being said and in detail and how. So the second stage of analytical reading helps you answer the second of the 4 basic questions you must ask of any book. What is being said in detail and how?